Okay, it's processing. All right, Deidre,
Okay.
your
Good
turn.
evening, everyone. Aleko ha. Today we celebrate International Mother Language Day. Now, International Mother Language Day was proclaimed by the General Conference of UNESCO in 1999, and in 2002, the UN General Assembly welcomed that proclamation of the day in its resolution. By marking this day, the United Nations calls on member states to promote the preservation and protection of all languages used by peoples of the world. Today, the Jamaican Language Unit, the Unit for Caribbean Language Research at the University of the West Indies, MONA, marks the day with a panel discussion on the state and status of the indigenous languages of the Caribbean. I am Deidre Telfer, your moderator for the evening. I am a lecturer in the Language Teaching and Research Center at UTech Jamaica, and a linguist who has done some work on Locono, one of the languages represented here today. This panel discussion is produced by Broadcast Jamaican, the media arm of the Jamaican Language Unit. We're asking you to just please check us out on the social media pages on YouTube and Instagram. If you are in the Zoom meeting, you will find the social media handles in the chat. And if you're following the live stream on YouTube, we will place them in the live chat on that platform. So remember to subscribe, like, and share the content. Also, please take a few seconds right now before we get into things to share the link on the YouTube live stream with your friends on social media. You can find the link in the chat. So, a bit of context before we meet our presenters for today. Before Columbus entered the Caribbean basin, the inhabitants of the mainland and the numerous islands spoke dozens of languages, many of them related to each other. Many of those languages have now been lost to time due to a combination of factors, some being genocide, diseases, economic and social marginalization, and this one is very popular today. Those languages that still remain are currently in a battle for survival. And it is these languages, these resilient languages, that we will be focused on in today's discussion. As we celebrate International Mother Language Day 2021, we have an interesting panel of community members, activists, academics you'll get a chance to meet shortly, who will be talking with us about these languages and their fight, their actions for survival. And one of the things that is very heartrending is that in many cases, many Caribbean people do not even remember that these languages exist because they do not speak them. So we want to definitely give them some focus this evening and hear about what has been happening, the wonderful work that many persons have been doing there. Now, the program is divided into two segments. The first segment will last roughly 40 minutes, and during that time, I will be posing questions to the panelists. We, however, would like the discussion to be enriched by the panelists asking each other questions, even while I engage with each of them. All right, so please, panelists, remember to feel free to pose questions to one another while we are in that first segment. For the second segment, we will open up the floor to members of the audience to ask questions. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, you can type your questions in the chat and they will be passed to me. For those of you here in Zoom, we know that you have burning questions. I think that our organizer has muted everybody, but just in case you feel moved, just hold your question until we get to segment 2 and keep your mics off for me. Okay, so now that we have gotten that out of the way, let me introduce you to the members of our distinguished panel. We have with us Skeeter Samantha Thomas. Skeeter Thomas is a proud local hero. She's a proud Arawak woman from the village of Wakapo in Guyana. She was born to fluent speakers of Lokojang, referred to in the literature as Locono. The language has always been a part of her life. After being educated in the city, away from home, she returned to Wakapo to work along with her mother on their journey to revitalize Lokojang. And I'm sure that Uncle James has been a part of that process as well. Prior to that, her mom, Auntie Joan, had met with students from the University of the West Indies. I am one of those students, and I'm sure there might be others in here as well. And a relationship was formed. Over the years, the revitalization efforts of the Wakapo community and this family in particular were recognized by the Guyanese Languages Unit, an organization based in the University of Guyana. Hi, Charlene. Today, this proud local hero is actively working in her community and with the other organizations, to revitalize and preserve Lokojang. So that's Skeeter. Next, we have Robert Kalan Pierman. Now, Robert is first and foremost a Behike. I hope I pronounced that right, Robert. You can tell me later. A Taino medicine man, and was recently chosen as the appointed Kashik, the Taino chief for the Taino tribe of the Jamaican hummingbird. He now walks with the Taino name Nibon Reach Kaimon. Again, when I start talking to Robert, I'll ask him to just pronounce his name for us so we get the proper pronunciation. I'm sure I messed that up just now, but he'll forgive me. And he is a member of the Council of Ancestral Indigenous Medicine of Abia Yala, the main organization for Caribbean region peace and dignity journeys, an affiliate of the Council of Native Caribbean Heritage and Academic Council for the Taino language. Welcome, Robert. Up next, we have Dr. Anita Barrett, a lecturer, and special needs lead at Qatar University in the foundation program, the Department of English. She's a native speaker of Garifuna and has been involved in the preservation and revitalization efforts for that language. She's also an ardent advocate for including indigenous language in national education systems. Welcome, Anita. And to complete our panel, out of Trinidad is Dr. Joanne Ferrero, Senior Lecturer in Linguistics at the UWI St. Augustine campus. She is President of the Society for Caribbean Linguistics and Fellow of SIL International, focused on the American areas She received her BA and PhD in Linguistics at the UWI St. Augustine and holds DELF, that's French as a foreign language, right, Joanne? And SIL and IPA certification, as well as a postgraduate diploma in Brazilian indigenous languages and linguistics. Her research and teaching interests include phonetics, with a focus on sociophonetics, contact linguistics, the history of Portuguese language and culture in the Caribbean, South American French Creole varieties, and the Bible translation. Now, regardless of the platform you're joining us on this evening, I want you to just take a moment and help me in giving our panelists a very warm welcome. You can use the icons in Zoom, please, or anything on Broadcast Jamaica. So thank you guys for joining us. And we are going to get right into the first segment. And I want to start with Robert. Robert is probably wondering why. Kalan, please, can you just say your name for us and the name of your tribe and explain them? Do they have significance? Tell us about them, please. You're still muted. Joseph?
Yeah, working on it.
Okay, thanks.
Uh, Robert, can you unmute?
That's strange.
Yes,
Well,
I'm
Okay,
muted now.
yes. Okay, great.
Oh
Go
gosh,
ahead.
you see all the struggles these mother tongues go through? All right. I guess I'll introduce myself first in what we call, or the group that I'm a part of, we call Wahiani, which basically means our language, subgroup of an Arawakan language. So I'd say Usanonu da Yukunu, Nibonrish Kaimandiri, Kasike Yukayeki Yame Wani Daka, Ikonye Wahia Waku Ahiani. So what I said is, good night, my people. My name is Nibonrish Kaiman. I am the chief of the Jamaican hummingbird Taino tribe. And today we are speaking about language. So the name Nibonrish Kaiman. Nibonrish I received from a cacique from Quisqueya actually, while doing certain ceremonies. And that name at the time represented red running water. So there's a saying in Northern Native culture that when you are following the path of the ancestors, they call it the red road. And for him, he was saying that the connection was so smooth and was so fluid with how I was digesting the teachings. He called it, like red running water or red river. Kaiman I received during my investiture ceremony as a cacique in 2019. As part of our tradition, once you go through a rite of passage, then there'd be an addition to your name. So that's why you'll have some of these larger names that you'd see in books and in different villages and communities, because it represents going through certain rites of passage. So Kaiman coming from the crocodile, which that is a story in and of itself. But that medicine, that teaching, and even that animal, I had encounters with that animal, came to me and it became a part of my name and who I am. One who looks and pays attention before acting and, reflective of my spirit, at least the way that the elders saw it. The community in Jamaica, we are from all walks, from all over the island, because we are active in a resurgence. Unlike some of the other communities, we are not
I don't want you
dedicated
to, sorry to cut you. I don't want you to get into the community just yet. Before you give me information on the community, we're coming to that. But I started with you because I am sure that some members of the audience are more than a little curious. Some may even be a bit skeptical. I mean, we were taught that Tainos have been extinct for some time now, but here you are in live and living color claiming to be Taino, right? So we want to hear a little about that. did you always know you were Taino? Tell us about that.
Okay. Well, in my family, there has been certain traditions and retentions that existed, but no, I didn't always know. It wasn't something that I grew up knowing. It came at a point when I had encounters with other indigenous people from South America and different parts around the Americas. And I was going through my apprenticeship as a medicine person with these traditions. And my grandmother had said to me one day, how come you're taking on all of these Indian things now? You come in like, in our language, she said, you come in like your great grandfather. So I said to her, what does that mean? And she said, he was a maroon coolie. And I said, maroon coolie. And she said, engine man, engine. So I said, okay. So now, I started to put a lot of the pieces together. And that is where I started to understand for myself that our history here, as it relates to the indigenous people, is very different from other islands because we're subjected to two different groups of colonizers. And as a result of that, a lot of the information that the communities have was kept within the communities. Is not something people spoke of freely because of fear of being seen as, that crazy aunt, that crazy uncle. And on top of that, there's also the fact that, as my grandmother told me, the concept that Maroons or indigenous people were not good people. They were bad people. That was also another narrative. The concept that Arawakan people were weak, and that is why they had to bring in African laborers. So there was a detachment from that aspect of our identity. So a part of my work was getting together with the elders and the community to be that.
All right, I'm not sure if it's my internet. I think we've lost
I'm not
Kalan.
hearing. I'm not hearing.
Okay, I think we've lost Kalan there for a little bit. So let's hope he gets back connectivity. All right, so I think he's out now. So let's hope he comes back in. But while we wait for him to come, I am going to talk a bit with Skeeter. Skeeter, tell us about your history with Locono. Tell us about you as a Loco hero and your family. Is that Kalan I'm hearing? No?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, he's back. So sorry, Skeeter, I'm jumping back over. So I'll be back with you shortly. Okay, yes, Kalan. So you were
So,
giving us that information about your family.
And I was saying that after going through certain rites of passage myself with other indigenous communities, because the narrative is not just in Jamaica, it is
Okay.
throughout the Caribbean. The narrative is that, or was that, all Arawakan people had died off, all Tainos had died off and are extinct. And there were elders that stepped forward and spoke against this, that were ridiculed, but they were the rallying cry of the community to come together. And now we have DNA evidence confirming what these elders were saying all along, that we are here and that we've always been here.
You've always been here. Okay, great. Now, tell me a little bit about the language, because you spoke some words for us, well, sentences actually at the beginning. Is the language alive?
All right. To answer that question, the whole Taino movement is a resurgence. So the language, Taino language, as it was in 1492 and prior, it's dead. What we have is words. What we have is relatives of the Garinagu, of the Locono, of the Kalinago. And what has been done is that different groups in the Taino resurgence have taken on different modalities on how to restructure the language. So a part of the work of the Academic Council on Taino language is to take an educated approach to this, to get assistance from those like yourself and others here on this panel, because I know that our sister, Dr. Freire, was also contacted by the Academic Council, the person in charge, Dr. Juan Ramon Aviles, to give some guidance on methodologies to assist, because there has been prior work, but it really didn't stick as it relates to the Taino resurgence. So what we have is we have words. What we have is we have an example of living island Arawakan language like the Garifuna on how we can put the syntax together. We have our relatives, the Locono and the Kalinago, so that we can work together to bring back to the forefront or evolve what is left of the language.
Okay, so I want to move on to Skeeter shortly, but I want you to just tell us quickly about your community that you mentioned. I know that you are engaging in this reconstruction. Can you speak of any specific activities that are taking place and maybe future plans?
Well, Art, what I can speak of is one, as I had mentioned, in the community at large, there's the Academic Council of Taino Language that is working to take an academic approach, have people within the community study to become linguists and work towards restructuring the language to a level where it could even be taught in schools. That's one. Two, what the community locally is doing is working on what Northern natives term as land acknowledgement. So it's not that we're going to grab land, but at least to work with the government, work with Ministry of Culture in a way that there's an acknowledgement, as you're saying, that there are indigenous people here, there were indigenous people here all over the island, that Jamaica was a part of the Taino nations, and to have that at the forefront when we're doing our practices and our heritage, and as we speak towards the youth, because especially this time that we're going through now with the pandemic, there's so many teachings that can help the community at large if we learn from those who are here before us. Because if this DNA, because you can use the DNA, if this DNA still exists, if these people still exist, that means they survived slavery, they survived pandemics, all of these things. So there's a lot of wisdom in the elders to share with the community today.
Okay, thank you very much, Robert. The time is too short because I can think of so many other things I want to ask you right now, but I'm going to jump over to Skeeter and just ask her a few questions before I get to the other panelists. Skeeter, my sister, I want to start at a place where we look at the current state of the language. Now, various works on Locono have described it as moribund, meaning that it's basically at death's door, right? It's severely endangered. How do you feel about that as a younger person within your community?
Well, yes, I've heard that term before. And when I'm in the village, well, a few years ago, it was to a point that people my age, they weren't even interested. They weren't speaking the language. They were ashamed of even their parents speaking to them in the language. But today, it's a little different. We have a very long way to go. But the passion that I have for my language, I know for a fact that it will not die.
Okay.
It's been really tough. Unfortunately, I see my people it's like they need to be motivated to revitalize and preserve our language. And I say unfortunate because from my point of view, this is not something that we should do. This is something that we must do. And it's interesting to know now that people in my community, they recognize me as someone fighting for the language to survive. And not only me, my entire family. And Deirdre knows that all too well. My family, since mom and dad, when my mom was here and everything she did, she was always excited about the language, always wanted to share. And my father he's my teacher. He corrects my pronunciations. He's there, listening. And my brothers, my brothers are fluent speakers, I know that. But it's like they still have this sort of, how should I say? They don't speak the language like how mom would have, very comfortably.
So it sounds as if Auntie Joan was the one really pushing the
Yes.
efforts. I remember that she and Uncle James used to go out and perform for traditional local songs, etc. For different
Yes.
events. All right, but
Yes.
do you speak the language? Was the language spoken consistently in your home when you were growing up? What do you remember about that?
Yes. Well, I was asked this question before. Well, on many occasions I was asked this question, and I tell you now the same thing that I have said before. I grew up in a Christian home with two fluent parents of Lukajan, and I was being taught the English version of what the Bible was, and my mom would explain everything to me in Lukajan. And at a tender age, I used to read stories, and when I read a story, I would ask her to explain it to me in Lukajan. So the language is with me.
Mhm.
It's part of me. It's what makes me who I am today as a person. And even though in my youth and that's a few years ago, I wasn't so active in language preservation. I'm so thankful today for all that my mom had taught me. And I should say I found my way. And this is an exciting journey for me. And
Okay,
yes, I am speaking my language.
lovely, lovely. All right. Now, in the earlier session, the Guyana Languages Unit had a session. I heard you do a beautiful rendition of a song. I am just going to ask you for a little piece, and if you could just explain to us what it means and what is the motivation behind it. I think we can guess at the motivation when we hear what it means. But anyway, go ahead, and if you can just wow us now with your lovely voice.
Okay, well I'm gonna give you the song and then I'll give you the explanation after.
All right.
Oh, don't worry, I came prepared.
I like it.
Dukawanayon tuhurikai Diamada kushiabo Dukawandabon nabichiro Yoro kushibe Kanabak Namakwana rakuwa sa bechi wonguro. Duluku aja washa aja hosabu.
Nice. So, what does all that mean for everybody?
Okay.
Yes, thanks, Anita.
Well, so I was in my home and showing me, as you guys have seen me fanning this just my skin is always hot. So I went and took a late night dip and I was enjoying the water and all that. So I was sitting on the step and I was looking up at the skies and the stars and everything. The night it was like so perfect. And you know me, phone in my hand, I made a post and uh it was not exactly the same words, but they Professor Devonish, actually, Professor Hubert Devonish, he took my little post. It was actually a poem, and he put it in a poetic form, a more poetic form than I had it. So uh, the words of the song is looking up to the sky with my two eyes. Looking back at me are a thousand eyes. Listening to night noises in a thousand voices of all those who have gone before. In a language we speak no more. But if Professor Devonish is listening to me right now, the love song, the love song to Lokajang, it's not a language we speak no more. It is a language that seems to be dying, but I will not let it be.
Okay, great. So on that note, Skeeter, I want you to just quickly tell us some of the activities that you have been involved in regarding revitalization of Lokojang.
Yes, well, being, I should say, an external member to Guyanese Languages Unit, I have had the opportunity to, well, on a, how should I say, from a linguistic point, I understand it's like understanding the structure of my language a little more now than I did before, which I am very thankful for. And I'm so excited about this language that I do anything and everything when it comes to language. Whenever anyone even calls on me, you know, I'm always willing. Recently, we did some public service announcements for the COVID-19, the precautions and sensitization, all of that, and I was, you know, it felt like I felt accomplished when I finished those PSAs because, you know, it's the older folks who are keeping the language alive, and it's the older folks that are, you know, they're the ones that it's more the pandemic. Well, as it seems, it's more harsh to them than the younger folks. And if I can get the message over in Lokajang, so even two persons in one community, I still feel accomplished by doing so.
Especially since they are the ones who speak the language right now, right?
Exactly.
And most comfortably. Thank you so much, Skeeter. That was a beautiful song. I am now going to jump over to Qatar for our Belize representative, Anita. Welcome again. Now, what I should have said earlier is that all of these languages so far are actually related. You know, they belong to the same language family. So we are here celebrating with relatives, right? Now, Garifuna is another fascinating story. And has been probably the most successful where revitalization and language maintenance efforts are concerned. So, and I know a little bit about it, Anita, but you have been living it. So I want to hear from you. Tell us about Garifuna. I want you to start with a little bit of history though, because it's still referred to as Black Carib, you know. Give us a little history there, please.
All right, so Mabuganeho Sumutu Gundat Nduanahalaya Hamaguyongle. So I'm saying greetings to everybody. I'm happy to be here with you tonight. And before I go into our history, I just wanted to point out that already when I listened to Kasiki, and he said Wahiano, it means our language in Taino, and in Garifuna, Wayanu means our language or our conversation, our language. So it's so close. Also, you referred to Skida as a Locono Hiaru, and in Garifuna, Hiar is woman or female. So already we can see where, as much as we're so far away from each other, we don't even really associate and see each other. Our languages remain alive and they share similar structures, similar words, and a lot of similarities. And we haven't even gotten into the actual culture that we live yet. So that's already a big thing for me coming out. So historically, Belize, Garifuna is a mixture of Arawak and Carib Indians and African slaves historically from St. Vincent. We were exiled in the 1700s, and we landed in Central America, Honduras. And then we moved from then towards Belize. Majority of the Garinagu are in Belize, between Belize and Honduras, but we go all the way up to Nicaragua. But how did we become Black Caribs? That was the point where we, whereas history is that African slaves, this is one version of it, who used to escape from Jamaica. This is what I heard from Jamaica, that the stream, by some chance, would land them in St. Vincent, where the Caribs and Indians, the Caribs and the Arawaks already were. And of course, being hospitable, they took them in and then they started intermarrying and so on. So, but as is the nature of the Caribs, we would not back down from a fight. We were not going to be enslaved. And so, of course, when the oppressors came and tried to get us and take away our lands, we fought back. Eventually, we made an agreement and we were put on some ships and exiled from St. Vincent and landed in Honduras in on April 12th. What year was it? 1797. So that's our history. And so in terms of our physical features, then you'll still find that you'll find Garinagu who look like Skeeter. You'll find them who look like Clive. You'll find some who look like me. You'll even find some who look like Joanne. So, you know, but linguistically, our language, I have changed my mind about the status of Garifuna as an endangered language. 10 years, no, more than 10 years ago, in 2004, I took a group of students to Belize. We were doing a course, Introduction to Garifuna at the University of the West Indies. And the field work that I required them to do was visiting Garifuna settlements in Belize. And one of the conclusions, the students, and these students were students from Jamaica, Bahamas, Barbados, Trinidad, what they concluded was that Garifuna wasn't endangered at all. And they were very excited about this because the language was alive, there are speakers, it is used in the community, but what they concluded, and I saw that, but they said it better, that it had changed. But the way it changed, it is so subtle, but still so different, but it is there. So Santiago Ruiz did a study a few years ago where he also stated that Garifuna is no longer endangered. But what we're going through is we're transitioning into the influences of the languages that we that are in our communities. For example, in Belize, the majority of the population is mestizo, Hispanics. We have Mayas, then we have Creoles. In Honduras, majority is mestizos, Hispanics. And so the Garifuna in Honduras is Spanish
Slightly
based,
different. Mm.
right? And the Garifuna in Belize is like Creole, English Creole based. But still, it is alive and well. When it comes to the language, though, in terms of transmission, a lot of our children do not speak Garifuna. But in terms of identity, accepting and claiming the Garifuna identity, it has improved over the years. When I was younger, I went through a phase when, no, I don't want to be Garifuna. No, I want to be a Creole girl. You know, oh no, I don't speak that being the Garifuna language, because that was not the thing to be. But today it's a lot different now. We have improved a lot in that area. The Garifuna identity is more vibrant. Young people are now participating in the culture. But the problem that I have arrived at is that how do we get them to have this vitality about the culture, the language, the dance, music, everything, but they do not use the language to communicate. They don't speak Garifuna, but they can sing a Garifuna song. They can run a Garifuna party. But in terms of communicating to each other, they do not use the language.
Anita, sorry to cut you. I want to go back to something that you said, because you said that you no longer consider the language to be endangered.
No.
And
I know
what contributed to this renewed vibrancy of the language? Did the specific policies play a part in that?
Yes. In 2001, well, prior to 2001, Roy Caetano and a few other Garifuna leaders, but spearheaded by Roy Caetano, wrote a proposal to UNESCO. And it was accepted, and UNESCO, the Garifuna was declared a masterpiece of oral and intangible heritage of humanity. And at that time, I remember when we got that award, Roy Caetano gave a speech where he says that no, Garifuna is no longer just ours, it's for humanity. And then so humanity will participate in preserving it. And what happened with that award is that we, spearheaded by the Caetanos, Roy and Phyllis, promoted a lot of activities to teach the dance, teach the music, and along with late Andy Palacio, they all participated in this vibrant movement to just reintroduce the language and culture from a teaching standpoint, not just to catch it accidentally. They actually organized programs. They went into villages. They taught the dances from scratch. Like they brought a whole generation of young people to teach them the music, the dance, and then they also brought a generation of very old people, because it was after that Andy Palacio got somebody as old as everybody knows Paul Nabor. These are very old icons, but you know, you would see them in the village singing their songs. They create, and it was just like local, domesticated. And with Andy Palacio, they honed all these older people, Paul Nabor and this guy, one of my favorite, how can I forget his name? The one who said, well, happy nigger never dies. Some Brazilians are here. He's always very happy. That's his motto. I forgot his name. Oh my gosh.
Junior Aranda.
Anyway, yes?
That would be Junior Aranda.
Junior Aranda, yes. All these older people were brought to the forefront. They were made international. They were made to travel. And this was the beginning of Garifuna coming back to life. And right now we're still enjoying that. the concern though, and then we do have the Gulisi Garifuna School that was established in 2006. And this is a school that where the curriculum follows the government standard academic curriculum, but it is taught from an intercultural bilingual education standpoint. So everything about it is Garifuna, even their uniforms. If they're teaching the standard national curriculum in math, it is infused with Garifuna words for math. Everything is Garifuna, and that has been very successful so far.
Thank you
And
for that.
yeah.
Go ahead, Anito.
No, but these are some of the things that have these have really resulted in Garifuna being vibrant, but we still have a lot more to do with the language though. We still need to do a lot more to get the language to be spoken, you know.
Right. So I actually want you to talk a bit more for us as an activist for the inclusion of indigenous languages in the national education. Why is that so significant? What does it achieve for the community?
So it is related to my initial concern about the language not being like we're passing the part where we think we need to own the spoken part of the language, and putting it in the school makes it more viable and makes it more available. And we're from a mindset that whatever we're taught to be good, it is good. So if in school you have to take Spanish, for example, a lot of our kids speak Spanish because Spanish is taught in schools. And then they go home and their grandma speaks Garifuna and they don't speak Garifuna. So if Garifuna is presented in the school environment, I feel that it'll kind of give it a kind of importance that'll encourage the younger generation to start paying attention to it. Also for the fact that psychologically we're programmed that we learn like in the school environment, you know. So automatically as a child will put himself in the learning mode because there's some value. Because psychologically as a people, we sometimes devalue the things that those seem important, you know, and language sometimes is one of the things that we think are not so important because it has nothing to do with the bread and butter issues, you know, so it's first to go. So like Skeeter, people like us, then we have to go the extra mile to ensure that we put things in place that makes the ordinary not so ordinary. Because the ordinary would be to let it go because it has nothing
Right.
with life and so on, but we have to make it relevant to the experiences of our children.
And I've just from my own field trip experiences, I've come to realize that that issue of value, that issue of significance on a wider scale is
Right.
one of the things that is really has placed the languages, many of the languages, in the state of endangerment that they are. I can remember a number of instances of speakers of Locono, older speakers of Lokojang, saying that they were even beaten in school for
Right.
speaking their language, you know, and that was naturally a discouragement. And we were interacting at one point with a mother and a daughter, and the mother was saying, you know, the young people didn't want to learn the language, and the daughter was saying, but the old people don't want to teach us the language, right? They want us to learn English because it is what will make us
Exactly.
advance.
Yeah.
Right. So it goes back to that economic value that is placed on it. And even at times, even persons who tend to have interest and do speak the language want to know, all right, what is in this thing for me? Right, where money is concerned, because I need to ensure that I am okay there. So there is that as well, you know.
Right.
Anita, so
Mhm.
I want to just continue a bit with the education. I know that that wasn't easy to achieve, getting Garifuna in school. Um, what were some of the roadblocks that you would have come upon,
Yeah.
the group would have come upon in trying to get something like that in place?
That's a very good question. So in about 1999, around that time, somewhere around there, and when I was starting to push to the people in education to get it, they came back at me and said, "Listen, Garifuna isn't written. Where would be your textbook? What would you use? So you don't have books. You don't have, you know." And so it started. And I started working with Professor Devonish again, and because we felt that it was very important to understand the structure of the Garifuna language to be able to write it. We needed to look at the orthography too. Um, and of course, there are other people who have done a lot of work in orthographics, like Roy Caetano. Again, he produced the first Garifuna dictionary, so that was a step already. But we didn't have a linguistic description of the language, like where's the noun, where's the verb, we don't know this, you know. So it took a lot of study to kind of arrive at the fact that Garifuna is an agglutinating language. It's an VSO, these kinds of structures. And when you talk to a native speaker speaks the language. Native speaker won't tell you if it's a noun or a verb. I
Exactly.
don't know, you know. So you'd have to say, well, if I say a sentence like, for example, mehi numut. Mehi numut is an entire sentence that means I didn't see him. So which part of that is the noun? Which part is the verb? So it took years of work to be able to do that and to be able to teach the language from an academic standpoint using the structures that we're familiar with and putting it in that context. Now, it's arguable, should we do it that way? Because some people, they come up with their own writing systems to teach their language. I prefer just the phonetic alphabet to sound it out and spell the way we're familiar. And that's arguable, but it works for me. So the block was the fact that we didn't have materials, we don't have books. Even now, we still don't have enough. But we're at a better place now because we understand it a lot more. There's a lot more work to be done. When I taught Introduction to Garifuna at the University of West Indies so long ago, that was like, I was like walking in the dark, putting it together,
As
finding
you
out
go
things as
along.
I go along. Exactly. But from then to now, we have a lot more, but we need a lot more. So we do encourage people to write and to. And another thing about encouraging people to write too, then we get people who are overzealous, and then we start to have varieties and it started to create problems, varieties in spelling, varieties in how do we standardize when the language that I speak in my village in Sinbai would be different from the Garifuna that somebody from Dangriga speaks.
Okay.
I would say, for example, Mehi Numut. I didn't see him. Mehi Numut. Somebody from Dangriga would say Marihi Numut. You know, the eliminations and so on. And then there's sometimes we get strong-headed about which one is right and which one is wrong. Sometimes we don't want to agree that it's not right or wrong.
All
It's
right.
just a little bit different.
There is
So
a
how do we
variation.
standardize? Yeah, so in issues with publications, textbooks, writing, and standardization, even if the orthography is a problem.
Okay. You used the term SVO earlier. VSO, sorry. Could you just explain for those of us who might not know what that means, what you mean by that?
Okay, so the this basic English sentence is a subject, verb, object sentence. And Garifuna is the other way around. So it would start with a verb. But I should have come prepared for that. For example, Nehal or Nehal, I will see him. The N is the pronoun for I. The Eha is the verb with V, then him comes at the end. So I don't know if that is that a good example?
So what's the interpretation? I will see him.
Yes. Or Ehanali. Ehanali, I have seen him, for example.
Okay, so
Again.
what part? Go. All right, we're asking. Go again.
Okay,
Mr.
let me
Lewis?
write it. Go ahead, Wells. Anybody can jump in. Ehanali, for example, verb is Eha. Eha means to see.
Okay.
Eha Nali. So Eha is the verb, Na is the I, and Le is the he.
Right.
So it starts with the verb, subject, object.
I see
VSO.
someone mentioned in the chat that it's actually a word with a verb with affixes. All right, so
Yeah,
what that
that was me.
expresses. Okay.
Yeah,
Right.
I ran into the same problem in my dissertation trying to explain this because it's a little bit because of the noun is on the verb, but the entire thing is the verb. If you have
Right.
standalone nouns, they'd come after that entire verb chunk. And it's really rare. It's not very common among the world's languages. So it's like none of the
Right.
literature that I saw really explained what was going on well, and none of my professors really could sort of explain it well either.
It's a
So,
similar thing with Lokojang as well. So that kind of structure, especially where you have sentences with no object, you tend to have that a lot. You have some of them that are clear VS structure, right? Verb followed by the subject, but you do have some that are subject followed by the verb. So that's a split there in Loco. I'm not sure if that's the same thing for you.
The thing is with whenever you think you've arrived at a formula, something new
else
will just pop up. But, oh, I've never seen this one before. I do not know. But in terms of the agglutinating nature of the language, that is what makes it more challenging for people. But once you learn the basic structure, it becomes easier to see. Like even knowing that just the letter like Neha, I like to see Eha, Eha is to see, just the letter N, Neha, Teha, Leha, Beha, Heha, the conjugating that word I see you.
The pronoun, right?
Just those letters. And so it's interesting, it's exciting, and we know this much. We didn't know this before. And so we could put this in the context of academic text. And so we have a lot that we can now, but the mentality, the attitude towards the languages are still the same from the people who are in power. So they're not allowing us inside their schools. And as a matter of fact, I was doing some work with Skeeta and Charlene in Guyana. We're trying to do the same thing with Locono, trying to get it into the schools. And there is a lot of cooperation, but there's a subtle pushback, because another thing too, and then I'll stop because I'm interested to hear from other people too. There's this thing between why should I take time to teach Garifuna when this won't be on the standardized test that the students need to pass the exit exams to get into high school or from high school to university. It'll take away from the curriculum. It'll take away from what they really need to learn. So there's always this pushback.
Okay, thank you very much. Anytime. I call on you a little later to add something else, but I'm going to go to Trinidad. Joanne, you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Great, great. No, I can remember.
Trinidad and Tobago.
Sorry, Trinidad and Tobago. Sweetie.
Tobago is our Amerindian name, you understand. So
I can't drop it off. I am so sorry.
That'll be like saying ja. Forgetting make now, you know.
All right. No, I remember a story in John Bennett's book, 28 Lessons in Arawak, where he speaks of Locono traveling via canoe from Guyana to visit relatives in Nakokairi, which is Trinidad in the book. And I've heard more recent stories of persons still traveling across to meet up with other Locono speakers there. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about Locono in Trinidad, a brief overview, anything you can share with us there.
I can't really talk about Locono specifically. I could just sort of give an overview of the number of languages that we had here, if that's okay.
That's okay, go ahead.
So for example, I think my interest was piqued at an SCL conference, Society for Caribbean Linguistics, when we had 2 papers being presented on the 200 toponyms or place names of Trinidad and Tobago that are indigenous. And I was like, 200? I mean, I know about Tobago and Arima, Guayagayari, Shakashi. I mean, I could probably list about 50 right now. I was like, 200? That's amazing. It was an archaeologist and a linguist who came together. So, and then recently that interest was rekindled when I saw a map of Spanish Trinidad, because there's this effort to make Spanish Trinidad and Tobago's first foreign language, whatever sense that makes. Sorry for being so politically incorrect right now. But in a particular document that was quite official, they included the name Toco, which is on our northeast coast, as a Spanish word, as if it came from tocar, the verb to touch, and as if Christopher Columbus sailed by and said, I touch the northeastern peninsula. It makes no sense. So I said, well, I remember seeing that in this SCL paper from, what year was it? I forget. And that Toco meant wild sapodilla, which is naseberry for Jamaicans. And I think, yeah. And it's a caravan word, right? So so many of our indigenous names got sort of lost in because they were overtaken by the Spanish. It was very nice of the Spanish to keep so many. We in fact have, of those 200 place names, the majority are caravan. So even though there is a lot of Arawakan influence, in fact historically we had 3 Arawakan languages, Locono itself, Shibayo, and Igneri. And then we had 5 Caravan ones. We had Kalinia, Karine Pagoto, Chaima, Nepoyo, and Yao. And we had Warao, which is an isolate, and 2 others called Kalipunan and Chaguane that were in Venezuela. So between Venezuela and Guyana, there was always that input into Trinidad, and we still have Warao speakers here. In fact, COVID-19 and Maduro have brought more Warao speakers into the country than ever, because the name Warao, I think in Warao means boat people or people of the canoe. So they're in the Orinoco Delta, which is that big river delta that is in the south of Trinidad. So they come over to see family all the time. So we have a Warao chief in the south, and we have a First Peoples group in the north that are a mixture of Caribbean, Arawak, and others. And they regularly have meetings. First Peoples, we had a First Peoples holiday recently. They invite elders and teachers from Guyana and Suriname to come and teach Locono. So that's the most I know about the language, that people have been invited to come to help people to reclaim at least one of the 11 ancestral languages that we have. So I don't know if that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Thanks. Thank you. Can you give us, I know you gave us 1 or 2. Can you give us a couple of the place names that you can recall? in
You want
Loco?
you want the meanings too?
That would be nice.
All right. So in Locono we have Aruka, which is supposed. Sorry, I'm looking at two screens here. Not that I'm looking away. I don't have this in my brain.
That's
Um,
fine. That's fine.
but what's interesting actually is that we have four names for silk cotton. The silk cotton tree apparently was a big thing here. So we have a Locono name for it, which is Saiva, which gave the scientific name to it. Then we have Mokarapo, which is place of the silk cotton tree in a Carib language. And we have Kapok that we borrowed from the East. And of course, we have silk cotton. So Saiva or Saiba is silk cotton tree. Naparima is supposed to be large water, or it could be from Nabarima, which is Warao. So there's a little area linguistics thing going on there. Guaya Geari, Waya means clay. Airi is supposed to be a variation of Kairi, which is island. Kurukai is an incense tree. And our three most well-known names are Karani, because Uni, I think, is supposed to be a suffix meaning water. And Aruka means Jaguar Island. And Siparia means hard or rough, according to the archaeologists and linguists who study this. So those are some of the most common Locono names that are, at least 3 or 4 of them are in quite widespread use. So.
Okay. Thanks for that, Joan. Shortly, I'm going to ask Anita if she recognizes anything from what you just said. Any of the words.
I'll send it in writing.
All right, no problem. All right, now I want to go a little theoretical for a bit. There are a number of words that tend to be out there as it relates to language death, language loss, endangerment. What exactly is language death the same as language obsolescence? I keep messing up that word. I know, is that different from language endangerment, or are these all words that we can use interchangeably?
I guess in this context, they all point to the same phenomenon of language loss, because a community can lose a language, a nation can lose a language, an individual can lose a language. So, like, for example, when I started to look at Portuguese and French Creole in Trinidad, I can't possibly talk about language death for these two languages because Portuguese is an international language, and so the language is alive. And I can't talk about it for French Creole because the language is doing well in Haiti and other places. But I can talk about dialect death, that the particular varieties that were in Trinidad have expired. I can talk, and obsolescence is related to that. You can talk about language attrition, where like a stone in a river being beaten by water. I think it's a good metaphor, that the amount of pressure that some minoritized, they may not be minority languages, but they certainly have been minoritized in a very negative way. And the amount of pressure that comes against people, the language slowly starts to erode. So, I mean, you could talk about language decay. You can talk about language homicide. You can talk about all kinds of things, language suicide for people who give up the language.
Language.
Yeah, so there are lots and lots of metaphors. But I think endangerment is the one that most scholars would be comfortable with right now, in the sense that, okay, like UNESCO and SIL have both ethnologue.com and from SIL and UNESCO both have proposed scales of language vitality. So the idea is that a language at, I think is 0 is the highest. No, 0 is the lowest. I forget which way. Sorry, I forgot to get those numbers in my head, but you have a whole scale to tell you whether a language is being passed on to the next generation, whether it's being protected in schools, whether they're being protected constitutionally and politically and educationally. So all of the languages, the indigenous languages of the Caribbean, do face some kind of endangerment, because if the whole population, rural and urban, and if all ages from babies to seniors don't speak it, and if they're not enshrined in a constitution in a world where writing matters and education and languages matter, then people are going to face problems at some point. And I think that's why we need to take a very protectionist, documentationalist kind of approach to make sure that these languages have enough resources so that every generation is equipped to keep on going forward. So
okay, great. Thank you for that, Joanne. No,
can I just mention one thing?
Go ahead.
I just want, one of the things I'd like to highlight is the Universal Declaration of Linguistic Rights, because harking back to something that you said to our Jamaican cacique, you said that people might feel skeptical hearing about the Taino. Oh, thanks for that broadcast.
Thanks, Joseph.
So this is the EGIDS level. This is talking about intergenerational transfer. So, right, so I was right. So 0 is the highest, so that English, French, Spanish, Portuguese, those kinds of languages are purple and they're fine. And there's no threat of English ever gonna die in a hurry. And then you have blue, which is developing. And then you have vigorous. So vigorous could be in speech or in all these levels. So it's very, very important to take those into consideration. But for the Universal Declaration of Linguistic Rights, I think that would keep people very quiet if they start to be skeptical about Caribbean people wanting to revive and to maintain and to make sure that our languages, our indigenous languages, are safe. And that is because the International Declaration of Linguistic Rights pays a lot of attention to history, so that people who are historically connected to a community, people who are historically part of a community, they have territorial connections and so on. They are within their rights to undergo processes of language reclamation. So like our people here in Trinidad and Tobago, they probably didn't grow up knowing a single Locono word, but they belong to the Locono world. And you as a relative of other Locono have every right. Thanks for that. It's downloadable online as a PDF. It was in Barcelona in 1996. So there are lots of, and out of this came actually our charter for Caribbean Creole speaking countries. So for, our charter doesn't mean that we're only protecting Creole languages in the Caribbean. It means that we are Creole speaking space and that we're going to make sure that all of our languages, sign languages, indigenous languages, and so on are protected. But that particular charter recognize, I forget what I was saying. Sorry, what was I saying?
The importance of the charter overall.
Right. Yeah,
protecting the languages, the charter,
right.
protecting all languages.
I think I was talking about our first, yeah, so like, okay, like I am 4%, everybody. Yes, I did my DNA testing, and my Taino brethren on the council, they have accepted me. I'm like, yay, because I figured if I were walking around with only 96% of me, I'd be incomplete, right? So I give praise to my
4%.
Yeah, my 4%. So my 4% is crucial because it goes into me. So, and you'll find lots and lots of people who don't even know that they have, and I mean, I always knew because of my great grandmother. She was from Venezuela. So we always knew we had a connection, but I just didn't know how much. Yeah, so if I descendant decided that I want to learn Locono, then it's also my right.
You're right.
Okay, so because it's not just in my blood, but it's in my national space. It's in my national history. So the entire country, the entire region, the entire indigenous space, because a Locono in Trinidad does not see the sea as an obstacle to get to Guyana. The sea is a conduit. So so even we have this joke about Trinidad and Tobago that the sea between us is the and, that connects us, right? So the sea does connect. The sea doesn't separate. So in many of our perceptions, we see the sea as a separator, but it's actually a uniter, because if you have the whole Warao nation being people of the canoe, well, what's the big deal about moving around? And I remember going to Venezuela in a pirogue. we clearly needed some ancestral help, okay? Because we went at the wrong time of the day, against the tide. We almost drowned. The waves were horrendous. I mean, that particular area between Trinidad and Venezuela, it's in the north, it's called the Dragon's Mouth because it's that dangerous. And in the south, it's called the Serpent's Mouth because it's where the Caribbean and the Gulf come together. So it's a clash of waters. But that never stopped anybody from traversing these paths. And all of that to say is that when I speak to my friends in the First Peoples area, they see their spirituality and their ethnicity and their historicity as not being confined to one island. They see it as being the whole Locono nation must include them, right? So that therefore, even if they have been historically denied the privilege of learning the language, they now have the power to say, we're going to overturn those denials. And that's why they are now very much part of international indigenous celebrations. And the government just finally gave them their own land back, you know, to do other things, because they have a museum already. They make their cassava flour, they do all kinds of other things in their art and craft. But I mean, that's almost like tokenism. It's almost like to shut people up. But the land, giving them back, is an extremely important act. And even our seat of parliament, our parliament was built on a resting place for indigenous ancestors. And that was one major scandal when the archaeologists went there and they found out, but look at all these bones. This was a midden and it was a burial place. So there was a whole prayer ceremony to ask, you know, forgiveness for the Spaniards and whoever else did it. And to pray for the ancestors and so on. So that was a big national thing at one point, you know. So there's a lot going on, and not everybody sees it. I'm not always that close to it, but theoretically, I'm here to help. As our brother said, whatever help we can give as linguists, particularly through the society, because in the past, the Society for Caribbean Linguistics, of necessity, had to focus on our majority languages, which were Creole languages. And those majority languages have been denied rights and privileges for so long, and the speakers. But recently, in the last 10, 15 years, out of our 50-year history, we've been making sure that indigenous languages and sign languages and others get represented. So when we went to Guyana, French Guyana, we had a really, really important time talking about the indigenous languages of the area, of the Guyanas, Venezuela, and Trinidad and Tobago, and the rest of the area. So
okay, Joanne, you introduced what I was going to ask next, the role of the linguist in revitalization as opposed to the role of the community. What role do linguists play in revitalization activities?
I think linguists should see themselves as servants to the communities, as people who have had a certain amount of scientific training and who have a certain amount of a certain number of international connections in terms of support. So for example, if I wanted to come alongside a community here, I could refer them to activities that's happening in Hawaii, because I've been there and I have colleagues there. I can refer them to things that's happening in Ireland and the south of England and Israel and so on. So because linguists have a certain type of training, and Anita pointed to the importance of the International Phonetic Alphabet and other things as well. And of course, grammar, understanding grammar, things like dictionaries and lexicography and all that. So these things, I think that linguists like, how to put it, that if you go into the immediate metaphor that comes to mind is that you're going to somebody's house, it's their house, but you are just contracted to, I don't know, maybe fix the cellotex on the roof, maybe fix a few cracks in a wall, analyze the civil engineering so that you can make sure that the building is earthquake and hurricane, free. So my view of the linguist is not this obnoxious outsider who is wanting to come in to make their international fame and mark and get a ton of publications and be referred to as Dr. So-and-so, it's like, there goes the hero of, I don't know, Trinidadian Locono, God forbid. I think those days are done. That's a kind of colonization that we can just throw out the window. And as Caribbean people, we are a little too familiar with the impact of colonization on our own psyche. I mean, I can't even open my mouth anywhere in the world and people want to know, so what's your mother tongue? If I can say English Creole and that would shut them up, right? But if I happen to say English, depending on my mood or depending on my thoughts, I'd probably be abused. It's like, how can you claim English? Because it's like, hold on, a Cuban can claim Spanish. I can claim whatever language I want, right? Anyway, that's another point. But we know about colonization. So I don't see the role of the linguist as a bully or as a benefactor or as either of those negative extremes, because a benefactor is very patronizing and a bully, well, they just want their own way. I see the linguist as somebody who needs to learn a lot, who wants to learn a lot, and who also has learned a lot in certain areas, because there's none of us before we did linguistics had any clue about the languages that we speak. So linguistics is probably the least intuitive, especially phonetics and phonology, and Lord, I teach those anyway. So people are very interested in words. People would love to pick up a dictionary and all that, but dictionaries don't get written, compiled in a vacuum. Dictionaries get compiled after years of historical research and literary research and phonological representation, all kinds of things. So we have at our disposal a lot of tools that can be useful. And that's why I like to consider myself like a handyman. So I'm like a handyman linguist who has some tools in my little toolkit, and that I can help somebody who has a lovely house, just, make sure that everything is okay. And as I said, I can go so far with this analogy and then it comes to an end. But the role of the linguist to me is a support role. A support role to make sure that communities have their voice, have their say. They tell you what they want. Now, you might have some other ideas too, but I mean, minds can meet. And once we go into it, extremely humble, because, humility cannot be thrown out the window, because everybody has to learn. And I think everybody who's done linguistics will remember how humble we had to be now starting off learning about morphemes and phonemes and so on. So I trust that humility will continue, and that we can continue in a support role.
Okay, lovely. Now, I am going to use this next question as a bridge to go back to Cacique Kalan. I know that you have been working with his tribe in the reconstruction / revitalization revival efforts. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, unfortunately, we had a death in the community, in the council.
Oh no.
So that, and COVID-19 has really, put a spoke in things. And also the leader of everything, Juan Aviles Morales, he was sick, so he's now getting back on his feet. But
I'm here.
You're here? Oh,
welcome,
yay!
welcome.
Wang, you can speak. So Wang as well. So Wang, you tell us what's going on. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you for having me. I was listening and learning a lot. Prior to me getting sick, we were working with the American Indian Language Development Institute on trying to bring together different groups within the Taino community to revitalize or revive the language. And Dr. Carla Lynn Melendez played a big role in that effort. And unfortunately, she passed away last month. So, and then with my health temporarily being a setback, but I'm feeling a lot better now. And I have individuals in Cuba, a family clan, and a couple others from Jamaica also that we want to work together with people in Puerto Rico and throughout the Caribbean to bring back the Taino language. And we were trying to see if we could apply for a grant to help in that projects that we had in mind. But I had a little mishap with my health for the past 2 months, but I'm getting better, and I'll be contacting everyone shortly and trying to get back on track, because that's something that Dr. Melendez wanted us to continue. And unfortunately she passed, but and that was a big setback for our community, but we're trying to move forward now.
Okay. Before all of this, did you start anything specific? Joanne, were you consulting on anything specific for the language?
Me personally?
Well, you, but it's also open to members of the group who are here.
I think Wang is better placed. I remember one of the interesting exercises that he gave us was to go and do some research about 5 words. And because one of the things that you have to do when you're reconstructing and revitalizing and infusing new life into a language is to look at the internal morphological processes of word creation. So if the language is open to borrowing, that's one issue. Well, borrowing is kind of like a last resort. I mean, we can't get into total purism or whatever, but to look at the actual documented language as you have it and related languages, understand whether they do things like putting 2 nouns together or affixes, so compounding, affixation, blending, all those different things. What are the ways that the language grows or has grown? How does it construct its own words so that new words can be constructed and it wouldn't look like some kind of fake thing from outside? So that was the exercise that I remember we had started. But I think Wang and Kasike are better placed because I sort of came in kind of late.
Okay, Wang it is. Wang?
Yes.
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 Yes, go ahead, please.
Well, we were working on a project of constructing the dictionary of the words that we can find from that was left in documentation from the Spanish, and we were also taking whatever words we had locally from different parts of the Caribbean, like in Puerto Rico. There's a few words that remain from the mountain communities that at first we thought they were Spanish, but then we realized they weren't. and we're trying to bring those different books together that were published on the Taino language, at least the dictionaries that were presented before, and trying to bring them all together in one place. And maybe we were working on with an individual who was a computer science major in creating a game so that the younger generation can be brought in to find it fun to learn the Taino language. And we were working on that. And then I got sick and I had to put a pause on that. But that's something that we would like to do and offer to other native Caribbean languages, is to try to use that game platform where the individual can move along in the game as they learn words and can master the language slowly. And that's one aspect of it. The other was having an official dictionary of as many words as we could get. And then the other was getting help from the ALDI and other linguistic organizations to help us sort of come up with a template, how to proceed and how to work on whether we borrow words from other sister languages like Locono, Garifuna, or Wapishani, or Wayu, or how do we create new words? And we had an exercise where we had 5 words. I think it was television, astronaut, and internet were some of the words that were like, how would we create a word in Taino today for these words that we had no clue of or have no historical definitions in the past. So we were working with other groups who were not just from Puerto Rico. We wanted it to be pan-Caribbean. So Cacique Calan was very instrumental in helping us from Jamaica. And then we had the family clan of Ramirez Rojas in Cuba also. And we would do Zoom meetings and we'll have discussions along with Dr. Melendez and Dr. Richard Parada, who published on how to speak Taino and that's where we were last at. And then we started working with Joanne, and then that's where we left off.
Nice. I'm hearing a number of very exciting things going on. Somebody in the chat is mentioning the gamification, right? And that it played a key role in bringing back the Hawaiian language. So that's Helen. So you guys are doing activities that have proven effective. So good job. I'm happy that you are feeling much better and that you are pretty much ready to continue with the project. Thank you so much for sharing. Kalan, I'm back with you because I know I saw a few questions directed at you in the chat. So I want to speak with you again, just to ensure that those questions get addressed. I told you that persons would be interested in Taino in Jamaica, of all places, and they want to know where are the communities, where are the people, the speakers of the language, or whoever is maintaining phrases, words, etc. in the language. Where are they located?
All right. Or Yukayeki has members all over the island, right? And what happened is that we're doing some work now to create that space with assistance from the government that we can come together and preserve these things as a collective. So right now, the people that are preserving the language, that are pushing to preserve the culture, are the members of the Yukayeki, which is about 15 families strong that have dedicated to preserving the language, pushing that narrative, researching, growing on it. Because as one was sharing, we have words, but it comes a far place from, there has been such a long journey with the Taino language resurgence. At one point you have some words, and then there are simple sentences that could not be constructed. And over time, as we were doing more research, more information became available, we realized that, okay, we have a common connection. I heard Ignere mention with my sister, Dr. Anita, with the Garifuna. That is also a connection with the Kalinago. Those were a group of people that were throughout the islands, that were one of the first Arawakan groups of island Arawakans. So some of the groups prefer to work with island Arawakan languages as opposed to languages from the mainland, to kind of, we understand that you won't get to that dialect, as Dr. John was saying, as it was previously, but to at least attempt to take as much as we can from our mother tongue. So when I heard our sister speaking in Locono, Jan, I could understand when she mentioned Biama Ako as two eyes. And I know saying Biama now, Dr. Ernita is aware of that. When I say Abba, she's aware of what I'm saying. I'm talking about the number one. So those commonalities, when we found through our research that, okay, there's some words that exist in these relative languages. Let's create a connection with these people, and let's see if we can learn from them and help to grow our language. So our community right now that is speaking to a level is the members of the tribe. Outside of that, there are small retentions that would probably be the name of specific plants or specific animals. So as Dr. Freya had mentioned, they use agouti for the term for an animal in Trinidad. We in Jamaica, we say coney, right? But it's the same animal that we're making reference towards. It's just that our dialect here is a little bit different from those on the other islands. So we try to keep that catalog of the words that we have and keep them in circulation among our people. As we grow out, then we start to share more of that information, because we have genealogists, we have archaeologists that are part of our community, and what we're doing is really trying to put that information out there that we are still here. That's the first thing, that we're still here. And being here, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, a lot of narratives that need to be shifted. And we've seen where connecting to that language is really the root, the base to get a lot of this work done, because there's so much symbolism and teachings to receive from the language. I mean, we maintain the indigenous name of this language to a degree which not all islands were able to do. Jamaica coming from Jamaica.
All right.
So I hope, you know, I brushed over that, responding.
Yeah, and you did mention earlier that the language, as it would have been known before, is not alive, but there are people who do retain words, expressions, etc., and you're in a process of reconstruction now. I want to ask you a little bit of the connection with, because you are let me get the word right. Hold on. Behike.
Yes.
Yes. And that is linked to your Taino heritage, correct?
Correct.
So tell us a little bit about that.
All right. Now, as was mentioned, you have family clans and family groups that have practices in their clans, practices in their groups that are retention. So those that are on the coast, fishing villages, for argument's sake, they'll have certain practices, certain tools that they would make that is still done today. In St. Elizabeth, I mean, I know people that are still making the canoa, the traditional way, digging out the saber tree. So it was interesting to see that one mentioned as well. There are also medicinal practices that have been kept, not only in those that identify as descendants of Arawakan, but in Maroon communities as well. So for example, the creation of certain roots, how certain plants are used, the observance of certain cycles in nature. So a full moon has certain energies. There are certain ceremonies that would be done that time that would help with crops, separate from a new moon. So all of these things are a part of some of the retentions that we have. And for me, what took place is that I had an elder that came from South America. He was not Taino. He was teachings that came from the Andes Mountains. And he came here, and as a part of their prophecies and teachings, it spoke towards a resurgence of that indigenous consciousness. And what he did was carry me through an apprenticeship to understand the Native American mindset, the indigenous view of spirituality. So I could get a context as to the little pieces that remained here on the island, spread throughout different traditions, a little bit in Kumina, a little bit in this, a little bit in that. And underneath that guidance, he connected me with others that have Taino ancestry, that also have been preserving their practices, so that I could formally go through those rites of passage and be able to anchor that medicine and wisdom here for the community in Jamaica. So a very important part is, as it goes towards getting guidance, getting wisdom, there are certain plants and certain baths that one would take when you require to get counsel from what we call the semi, right? Which, you know, people would hear about in them history books and stories, which are really just ancestors that are venerated because they had a specific role. So there may be a semi that connects to storms, Waban Sesh. And there are practices that would have been done that would help you to protect your community or the area from Waban Sesh that would bring the huracan, the hurricanes. So it's to learn these rituals, to learn these practices, to connect with other communities that are doing these things so that it's done in a very wholesome way, because it's not, traditional medicine is not like a religion in the sense that you can read a book and then you can form your own opinions and say, oh, I believe this, so it's going to happen. No, it is very integral to understand how they observe the cosmology and that connection with the plants before taking on that role for the community. Okay. So it was a process. Mm-hmm.
Great. Now, I have one more question to throw out to everybody, really, and then we are going to open up the floor for others to participate, because I know that a number of persons have questions or comments, and I can see a number of them already in the chat. It has been a very vibrant discussion going on in the chat. Sorry, guys, I'm not very good at multitasking, so I can't really keep up with all that is happening in the chat, but I can see the interest in the conversations. Now, my question really is, Why bother? Why? Some persons might look at it and say, why are you going through all of this trouble to revive a language? Why are you spending all of this energy revitalizing a dying language? Why not just go with the flow? Why bother? I'm not sure who first wants to. Let me hear from Skeeter. I haven't heard from her in a little while. Skeeter, why are you doing this? What's your motivation?
Well, my dear sister, I don't have a motivation. As First Nation, we're not supposed to have a motivation to do what we gotta do when it comes to our language and preserving it. So why I'm doing it? Because I have to. I have an obligation to the generations to come to preserve our language so that they can know, they can learn from us. When we become ancestors to them, they must have something to hold on to, something to identify. We are Locono. We are the Jaguar people. And they must willingly carry on. My Zari is here, and you know she was singing with me this afternoon.
I saw her.
She knows that song so well, and not only that one.
Nice.
It reminds me, Mommy, I'm Locono. I'm an indigenous, and you know these little utterance. It makes me feel so proud of her. I don't let her see it, but you know, inside I feel this joy within me for my 5-year-old, recognizing and embracing her culture. So I have no motivations. I only have an obligation.
Nicely put. Anita.
Yeah, my motivation is it's my identity. I mean, that's the difference between you and I. We look like blood sisters, but I'm Garifuna. And one of the main ways that you would know that is by the language I speak, how I think, my spirituality, how I relate to my ancestors. It comes from what I learned from my culture. Even now, I specialize in teaching English to speakers of other languages. And today, there are certain things I just can't say in English. I cannot, I'm still translating from Garifuna into English. It is my core. So should that die, then it's like I die, my identity. So that motivates me to do whatever I can to participate in making sure that it remains. It's just identity. That's it.
Lovely. Clan? Kasike? All right, I'm not hearing. Okay.
Did someone call Juan by chance?
What? No, I called Kalan, but Juan, I'm not hearing from Kalan, so I'm going. Oh, here is. So just the same question, Kalan, just at you, and then I'm going to ask Joanne to just tell us from. Is there any special significance from a linguistic perspective to preserve these languages? Go ahead, please.
Okay, so for me, it's from, as you know, my sister shared, it's a part of your identity of who I am. There is a better understanding of the ancestors through how they would put a sentence together and express themselves. We don't say, I have anger, I am with anger, so I can leave it. Those little things mean so much, right? And allows us to help shape the minds of the young ones when we can teach them these things in songs and in stories. I grew up hearing stories about lands that I've never seen, and now I can teach stories about these lands here, about how we have the same but tree, and where the
Kalan is gone again.
I have a question if there's if there's time.
All right. All right. Let me just quickly hear from Joanne, and then we jump right into the questions. Because I think Kalan is having difficulties.
If I can just share this poem, I don't know if everybody can see it.
Yes, I'm seeing it.
When a language dies, the divine things, stars, sun, and moon, the human things, to think and to feel, are no longer reflected in this mirror. When a language dies, all that there is in this world, oceans and rivers, animals and plants, do not think of them, do not pronounce their names, they do not exist now. When a language dies, the window and the door are closed up to all the people of the world. No longer will they be shown a different way to name the divine and human things, which is what it means to be and to live on the earth. When a language dies, its words of love, intonations of pain and caring, perhaps the old songs, the old stories, the speeches, the prayers, no one, no matter whom, will be able to repeat them again. And when a language dies, then many have died, and many more will die soon. Mirrors forever broken, shadows of voices forever silenced. Humanity grows poorer when a language dies. So that's it from me.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Joanne. Lovely. Now, we have been talking for quite some time. I'm sure that our audience has not realized that we have been chatting so much because the discussion has been so rich. But we're going to allow others to ask questions. So I want to first just thank our panelists for such a stimulating discussion, for sharing openly with us. We have heard and learned quite a lot, and we recognize that the journey to preserving these languages is not an easy one. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's a journey worth taking. So let us be encouraged by that as we move forward. So I'm going to open up the floor now and just remind persons who are on YouTube, if you have questions, you can post them in the chat and I will get them and direct them to the participants. For those in Zoom, I'm just going to ask you please to raise your hands if you have a question and I will acknowledge you. And please, 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 I know we have been going for a while, but we want to keep the questions and comments as short as possible and the responses as well. Before I go into the chat, Anita, just go ahead with your question and then I will take the first question from the group. You're muted. Unmute, please, Anito.
Sorry about that. I was just wondering what strategies, what systems any of my panelists have in place to enter new words into their language. It's an ongoing thing here, like things like Facebook, like in Garifuna, we have a thing with which word do we use for Facebook now in Garifuna? Some people say this, some people say that. So is there a system in place that maybe Kasike, you use to enter new words?
at the moment, what we do is for new words like Facebook, no. For new words, as in prior to the development of our language, we kind of look at the etymology like we did with the example of computer and astronaut. So with Facebook, we'd look on what is it, the meaning that we're trying to convey. So it's really one form of social media. So we'd look into that. How would I explain this to an elder? How would I explain to them in the name, what is that this would be used for? And we have discussions around that.
But do you have so you have a committee that probably would meet around it and then arrive at a decision on it?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, and
Sorry.
give me a moment, please,
Yeah.
Keisha. I'll come back to you shortly. I see Clive in the
related-
chat saying, why not use Facebook because it's a trademark. So I just wanted to read that comment. Keisha, your comment is related to the question, I assume? Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. You're muted.
Sorry. I have this Maori dictionary. It's called it's backwards. Te Matatiki, Contemporary Maori Words. And what's great about this book is it's the Maori have translated all these complicated technical concepts, and they break it down into the essence of what they think that complex, concept is, and they have the indigenous versions. So I use this a lot when I want to look at sort of getting to the essence of maybe a word like electricity. Okay, what did they translate electricity as? Maybe we can use that same way. So that's one of the systems I use. But yeah, it's a great book. I recommend it even if you're not learning Maori. It's good to see the indigenous thoughts and concepts behind translating some technological concepts.
Okay, thank you for that. Can you share the information in the chat, please? Thank you. All right. Kate, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Deidre. Kate Davies, conference interpreter and interpreter trainer, coach, etc. And I had a question because I was actually approached not too long ago by somebody not directly in the Caribbean, but in Latin America, to train indigenous people in interpretation because of the problems of communication. So my question was, I have two very quick questions. One is, I know it's not the case for Jamaica, but for the other languages, and for instance, Garifuna, Belize, and Guyana, Locono, etc., are there people who speak only those languages? Do we have indigenous people who speak only the languages we're discussing, and therefore need translation or interpretation to be able to communicate with others? Or maybe they're bilingual, but with two indigenous languages, not any of the colonial languages. That's the first question. And my second question is for our brother Taino from Jamaica. Congratulations. I am fascinated. I didn't know about the developments and that you existed, and I'm really fascinated. I'll tell you why. I grew up in Jamaica at a time when, the Tainos were all dead, the Arawaks were all dead, okay? But I'm from St. Elizabeth. And my grandmother always used to tell me we had an Indian in the family, but it was hush hush. Now I thought she meant an Indian from India. And it's just in recent years I began to think, but wait a minute. Maybe she meant a Taino because I saw articles about this St. Elizabeth in particular being a parish. Is there no, I did a DNA test, but my DNA test didn't show up anything in the Americas at all, which really frustrated me. So I want to know, is there a more refined DNA test, or how can I find out for sure?
All right. The first question is, did you do it with 23andMe? Because they've updated a lot of their information. Doing with 23andMe. That's the first thing, if you're going to look into DNA.
23andMe. Okay.
Yeah, correct. And then also, if your family, if doing genealogy will help out as well. That's something that's helped a lot of people in our community. I mean, there's a timeline as to when East Indians came to Jamaica. So if you can trace to the 1800s or early 1800s, and you can find out some more about your particular family, then it will be able for you to put the pieces together and say, all right, clearly there was no one that came from East India. This is a tick already for me to do some more digging.
Can I just quickly add something on to what Cacique Kalan stated? I don't know if people are familiar with GEDmatch. It's a program where you can upload your DNA sequencing and compare it to others. Our group, we have 180 samples from a previous three studies actually of the ancient Tainos. The first one being 1,000 years before Columbus's arrival to the Caribbean. So we were able to take those from previous research done through Dr. Schroeder or Dr. Reich from Harvard, and we took those sequences and we uploaded them to GEDmatch. And we had some people match weekly, but still match some of these samples, which is another way to search, see if you have a connection to the Taino or other groups.
Okay, thank you very much for that one. Your first question is left unanswered though, which is whether there are any speakers of these indigenous languages who do not speak colonial languages. Anyone wants to take that?
In my village, we do have, I wouldn't say that there's anybody who's not capable of, but I can say that there'll be people who do not practice speaking Creole or English. And if push comes to shove, you might find them speaking English only, not Creole. So they go from Garifuna to English if necessary, but
Right.
not in the middle.
And I remember for Locono, when I first went for my field work, one of the days that I had to go into Wakapo was pension day, because that was when all the elderly people came out. And though they had the language, they spoke the language, but for the first time I went, nobody would talk to me. And one of the members came to me and said that they're ashamed because they don't really understand the English so well. So they speak Lokojang, they will speak a bit of Creolese, which is the Guyanese English Creole, but not English. All right. So we do, from that, I take it to do have persons who use the language consistently, might use a bit of Creolese, but really do not speak English. All right. I hope that answers your question, Kate.
Yes, thank you very much. Very
Okay.
interesting. Yeah.
Lovely. Juan, I noticed your hand was up earlier and it's down. You've said what you had to say, or you had a question? Are there any questions from YouTube, Joseph? Or any other question in the group?
I have a question, me. I wanted to ask if there's any systems that anybody else use to enter, to do like the letter of the alphabet. Like we had to come up with a system for Garifuna because we didn't really have one. Is anybody else did anything like that?
When you say a system for coming up with the letter for the alphabet, what do you mean
It's
exactly?
not a system, but like a sound, because we're trying to have them learn the ABCs in Garifuna. So our own version of it. So we describe the vowels, and then the consonants are just ba, ka, da, and so on. And then for the vowels, we describe the physical appearance, like the small a with the little arm. We call it has an arm in Garifuna, Garunat.
Okay.
The E, the small e, it has a little mouth, so we call it Gayumat. AEI with the tip, it has a point. So Gagirit and so on, AEI. Gararat. And in Garifuna, we have two U's. We'll have the and the O with the, how do you call those two things over there?
The centralized, those dots at the top.
So we have the Gagut, it has eyes, and Magut, it doesn't have eyes for those U's. And so that is our alphabet system in Garifuna.
So let me ask you, what's wrong with that?
No, I was asking if there's anybody else group that has anything that did anything similar, or if they have their own system of coming up with their letters.
I don't, well, in terms of Lokojang, I'm not aware of that. I know that some work has been done in trying to come up with a standardized orthography. for the language, but it has not yet, I think Ribka came up with something some time ago, but it has not yet been accepted as the standard orthography, which you mentioned earlier as one of the challenges with the revitalization, and especially where with Lokojang you have the variation, sound variation across dialects. So there is persons who would say one thing as opposed to the other. They recognize the differences.
Right.
But and I can distinctly remember one of the speakers, very prominent in the community, showing me this nice chart he did up. Somebody asked him to do a chart, and he said, but it's incomplete. So I say, why do you say that? What makes it incomplete? And then he said something like, he can't find any words for Q, X and something else. And I'm saying, but that's because you are still working with an English system in your head, as opposed to, you know, trying to represent the language. So there are these challenges, there are these things that need to be established. But I don't think I've not seen anything on Lokojang where that is concerned just yet.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other question? Oh, Clive. Go ahead, Clive.
All right. Well, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
All right. So I just wanted to say thanks to all the speakers, you know, based on the presentation that I saw, it was really fascinating and interesting and good to hear about all of these efforts. I just want to say, Anita, a long time here listening to you now, Anita. And the thing where you suggested a while ago, Anita, you have a system already. So my recommendation would be use a system which is familiar to your community, which fulfills the needs of the community, A. And B, make sure you can put it on a keyboard. Make sure, because chances are nowadays the developer writing system is going to be something that you need for type, which means it can easily reproduce on a keyboard. Right? Whether, you know, you have to do multiple keystrokes to get a particular character or something like that, but it have to be something you can reproduce in an electronic format. And on that note, I just want to encourage all of you, you know, indigenous language advocates to, regardless of what the government is saying, regardless of what the government is doing, and the detractors and so on, archive the languages. Right? You know, whatever it takes for you to do it, whether you need to modify an existing system, develop a new system. There are so many persons who are capable of doing these kinds of things in the Society of the Caribbean Linguistics. I think it was Keisha Josephs who was asking about connecting with a community. Well, Keisha, I am the secretary for the Caribbean, for the Society of the Caribbean Linguistics, and you should be a member. You need to join. Right? So, join this society. So I would encourage every person here who is interested in that to join the Society of the Caribbean Linguistics. We're going to have another biennial conference soon. One of these days, chances are next year in Trinidad. Come with your research, come with the kinds of challenges you are facing, and then we'll knock heads together, because let me tell you something. One day in the future, every single living language right now will be either unrecognizable or dead. And this is just a fact. This is just a fact. You know, we linguists, we talk about languages as living organisms. Well, nothing which is a living organism lasts forever. Right? And right now, there are more languages which have died and disappeared than we can count right now. And it shouldn't be that the indigenous languages of the Caribbean should just be wiped off the face of history, never to be recorded in any fashion whatsoever. So we need to aggressively archive these languages, ensure that them have YouTube channel, them have Facebook page. You know, nobody should be guessing. I wonder how they would have said this in a Garifuna or Locono. You're supposed to can just go up on your phone and type something and the information come to you. Fine. So this is what I would encourage all of you Indigenous advocates to be, you're doing important work. You're doing work which is unpaid, I am sure. Sure, you can't enrich yourself from this, right? But it is important work nonetheless. Keep on doing it. The Society for Caribbean Linguistics will support you in whatever way that we can. Probably it won't be monetarily, but whatever other way that we can, right? You know, me will sit down and work on, for example, curriculum things, because me I'm going to teach Jamaican Creole. Me I teach Jamaican Creole long time. Fine. So that's nothing for me. Sit down and help you. I can help with those kinds of resources. And there are other persons in the Society for Caribbean Linguistics. Joseph can help with lexicography. Deja can help with language description, and so on and so forth. Right? I think I saw Audine here earlier, who is researching Maroon Creole, and you know, she can help with the archiving and that kind of thing as well. So whole heap of people there. Keep doing the work. It's important work. And I hope to see you all at the next Society for Caribbean Linguistics Conference.
And your president is here, so I'm endorsing that.
Yes, man. Yeah. For real.
Thank you. I see Joanne posted the link in the chat as well. Thank you. Thank you also, Keisha. I noticed that you have shared a bit in the chat and you have provided your contact details. You're offering assistance with software, so we'll definitely be in touch there to hear more about that. But we have come to the part of the evening where we have to say our goodbyes. But before we go, on behalf of the Jamaican Language Unit, I want to say a big thank you to my panelists for this evening. You guys have been excellent. As I mentioned before, you openly shared your, not just your time, but your experiences and your expertise in revitalization, etc. So we want to thank you very much for coming out on a Sunday evening to take part in such a stimulating discussion. Thank you for helping us to mark this year, 2021, this year's International Mother Language Day in such a significant way. And I want to thank my audience who also gave up their Sunday evening to come and share with us. I know that I have learned a lot. I've been enriched, and I hope that you're leaving feeling the same way. Shout out to everyone here from Indigenous communities all over the Caribbean, and if there are others external to the Caribbean, I think one year in the States, who came out today to share with us. It was really great having you here. Don't forget to subscribe to Broadcast Jamaica. The recording, the video will be posted. So if you know of anybody who's interested, who missed this evening, you can direct them there to take a look at it. And the handles are in the chat again. Just post them for me, please, Joseph. So, Wausabo Wakaroho. I hope my local jang is a little rusty right now, but we are going now. Do enjoy the rest of your evening. And like Clive and Joanne, I'm looking forward to linking up with you guys in similar ways to discuss our languages, and hopefully we can do, well, we will be doing some good work together. So that's it from us. Thank you again, and good night.
Ayo.